you wrote a really great article sort of about this cloud cost dilemma with sort of the recent earnings report coming out of Snap. And I was wondering maybe if we could either use that case study or we could also open up a different case study to deconstruct some of the principles or practices to help somebody better control sort of the cost of goods sold or the cloud costs. So I was wondering, could you maybe either summarize that Snap dilemma or introduce us to a different case study?
Maybe, Patrick, let's take a step back and help folks understand the basics of like cloud economics, just so we have a level set, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
So when cloud computing kind of started out back in 2007, really with AWS, what were your options as a business? You could go open a data center, and you could go and buy physical servers and you can rack and stack them. And that meant that you were in multiple year contracts for different things, what we call power, pipe, and cooling. Like the data center, the physical space itself would be a multi-year contract. The servers would often be multiple year leases. Then you'd have to go buy network equipment and have all the engineering talent to put that all together. And then so that's one option. And then you could kind of bleeding into what a cloud is, you could kind of rent servers, but then you were kind of at the mercy of the hosting company. And then they had different packaged offerings. Some of them were not very flexible, like you couldn't really get capacity when you needed them, when you needed capacity. So the kind of AWS model says, look, don't worry about any kind of physical infrastructure. We're going to give you this scheme in what's now called infrastructure as a service cloud, and you can rent those resources on demand, meaning pay for those resources per hour. So computer costs $1 an hour. You spend 5 hours doing a job. Great, you've paid $5, and that's the end of your commitment with AWS. And then you shut it down and you owe nothing. So that was really promising to engineering teams. Why? Because previously, the adoption lifecycle for new, like if you wanted to create something new and you needed infrastructure to do that, you'd have to go beg the finance team to, hey, please, can we set up this project? So it would be this waterfall approach where you'd have to plan for the long term. So the cloud gave the keys to the engineering team, and that giving them the keys opened up all of this creativity. So we've seen that creativity boom. Just think about the things that have been delivered since 2007. It's just unstoppable innovation. And that's fantastic. The problem happened so we swung the pendulum to complete freedom, right? Now, and when you're in a boom cycle, nobody cares. Like you're growing the business as an engineering team, you're adding value, we're spending more on infrastructure. We don't care because we're growing so fast. Doesn't matter. But when the pendulum swings the other way, and we happen to be swinging the other way right now in a technical recessionary period, we have, as of the time we're talking now, we've had 2 quarters of negative growth. So now everyone's looking at their bottom line. How do we, as a public company, how do we crunch and make sure our earnings per share are growing and not shrinking as a result of a recession? Well, inevitably, where are you wasting the most money as a technology company, and many other companies, by the way? And that is, now that you've moved all of your infrastructure out of data centers into cloud, that's where your money is. That's where your costs are. So that's kind of a baseline. Does that kind of make sense, Patrick, at a high level?
Entirely makes sense in terms of the dilemma. Is like we've been in this boon, in this world of kind of like infinite capital and growth, which has yielded a bunch of creativity. And now that we're in this sort of painful moment where everybody's checking their expenses, cloud has sort of dominated a lot of the ability to create that innovation and that output. So yeah, I'm totally tracking.
So obviously customers are going to go back to companies like AWS and Google and Azure. Those are the 3 big hyperscalers, and say, hey guys, what can we do here? Like, this is way too expensive. And so there's this natural inclination here, and I'll explain the business motivation on the other side in a second. So for AWS, for example, they'll say, oh, well, why don't you commit to us for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then we'll give you a guaranteed discount. And customers first love it. They say, oh, great, we'll get 30% off, 40% off. All we got to do is commit for 3 years. Then there are different levels of discount if you put money down versus not putting money down, but you're still committing. And here's the problem with committing. You don't know what you need in the future. You don't know if your business is going to shrink, if it's going to grow, how fast is it going to grow? Are you going to go back to the well and recommit again? So this is a terrible customer experience. It also locks you into a very specific mode of operation, right? the way that clouds used to operate is the more specific your commit, so meaning, there are many computers on the menu at AWS. So the more specific you could pinpoint your type of computer, the better your discount will be. So obviously people went for the best possible discounts, but how do you know you're going to use that computer in the future? And here's where the problem gets really interesting. Computers don't stand still, they continuously evolve. We have an observation called Moore's Law that says every 18 months, the power of computers kind of doubles. So the transistor density on a chip doubles, and therefore costs go in half. And what happens as a result, let's say Intel or ARM or whoever introduces a new chipset, the clouds introduce those new chips in a new family of computers. And now those computers are faster, better, stronger, and cheaper. But you're stuck committed to this old family of computers because you wanted the best discount you could get. So you're literally committing to a 3-year deal where in those next 3 years, the probability of computing power increasing is very high, and the probability of cost decreasing for those same computers is very high. So you're not really getting the 30, 40, 50% discount. So I call these reservations or these look forward commitments a necessary evil because customers have to do it in many cases. They don't have an alternative. But at the same time, it's not good for their business. And Snapchat is exactly that manifestation. If you read the kind of the article that I wrote, they decided early on, I think it was pre-IPO maybe, that they were going to commit $1 billion to AWS. And to be smart about it, they chose multiple vendors. So they said, and we're going to commit $2 billion to Google. So now they have a $3 billion of committed spend. Imagine if that even depreciates or kind of loses 25% of its value. You're in a huge hole from the very beginning.